you have Siavash here and Peggy Shepherd, who's not showing herself, and that's okay. I'm not a big fan of doing that else on Zoom. Giving the presentation on the Deep River Watershed, modeling that we had started for, I think it's been almost 9 months now, maybe a little bit longer. Basically looking at problems and opportunities that exist not only on Deep River, also the confluence with the Little Cal, and also Beaver Dam Ditch, which is the main tributary for Crown Point, Winfield, and also Turkey Creek, which is the major tributary for Maryville, Cherville. So with that,
And just some additional context for the public is that Deep River is one of 2 primary tributaries into the Little Cal along with Hart Waterway, not Hart Ditch. So it's Deep River and the Hart, those are the 2. This is a study now of the Deep River tributary, basically for where it starts in our watershed all the way to the river. Is that correct, Dan?
that's correct. I'll give you the hard copy in case you didn't buy it.
Thank you.
So with that, Siavash, go right ahead.
Hi, Siavash. State your name and address for the public record, please, sir.
Sure. Name is Siavash Beik with Christopher Burke Engineer. I'm Vice President and Principal Engineer for Burke LLC in Indianapolis. And with me here is Peggy Shepherd. Peggy is the main modeler and engineer who has done all this work, which we are presenting today. Obviously, she has been deeply involved with this for the last year, so all the difficult questions on her. In any rate, it's a pleasure to be here, at least virtually, to present to you what we have done over the last year. So just a summary of this work. Let me just start presentation that one. We have, during our work, during the work, something to what was the motivation of this project to begin with. And we had been working with the commission for previous studies, the hydraulic modeling studies. And during those modelings, we noticed some rather large areas of significant flood vulnerability along the Deep River upstream of Little Cal in the lake station in particular, which was kind of larger than what we have is depicted in the flood insurance studies. And one of the things we said, okay, well, it's obviously this area that is subject to flooding could be impacted, but by projects that go on within the watershed, either positively or negatively for that matter. And looking at the commission's availability of the models that are there in the watershed, we see that there was a lack of some comprehensive, consistent, or what we call integrated modeling, something that we could evaluate projects and so that we can measure that impact or understand the impact regionally at least. So that project basically that led to working on this project of the entire watershed, which I will explain. But our goal basically saying that are we able to evaluate future projects or even past projects in a way that we can basically put the projects that you fund or you are involved with into 3 buckets. The first bucket is the positive, regional impact. It is a project that we are looking at as a overall impact, and it's not necessarily the local aspects, because I'm sure all the projects that are undertaken have some positive impacts or there are reasons for this project. But we are looking at regionally. Is that a regional impact? And with that we mean hydraulic impacts such as lower flood stages or lower peak flows, lower velocities. That would be a positive impact. Or the project may be in a second bucket. I call it just a negligible. It's not really detrimental or positive impact regionally again. And the third bucket is that project that we really need to be careful of is that the project that could be some local benefits, but regionally, it may increase elevations, velocities, or discharges that could be impacting some existing areas, perhaps. So with that, we to accomplish this, we had a few project components we were trying to do. First, evaluating adequacy of available modeling for use in the overall model that we were developing, creating and calibrating a watershed-wide hydrologic model. And the hydrologic models are the ones that try to estimate the flow based on the rainfall which is falling on the watershed. And then creating and developing an integrated, updated hydraulic model for selected major streams in the watershed. And I will go over those names, the streams there. And once we do that one, we wanted to develop this models into our standard 10-year and 100-year, what we call existing conditions, so that they're a base for evaluating things for this kind of a medium and large flood levels. Of course, developing a documentation, a project report, detailed documentation of the modeling and how it can be used. We also wanted to create a guidance for future use of the model in case we are not doing, or somebody else can pick it up and actually look at this model. So the guide to do that one exactly step by step how you evaluate a project. And then finally, we had a few projects that was suggested as to test to see if we can see the impacts of those, some past projects and a couple of future projects. So I'm going to go over each one of these just to briefly to get you. The first thing we were going to do was we didn't want to basically start repeating something which was done before. So we look at all available modeling which was available for what we wanted. And so we evaluated those available modeling data to select the usable elements so that we can use it in that integrated unsteady state model. And when I said unsteady state, we're talking about the hydraulic model that takes into account both the traveling of the peak flows, but also it takes into account the storage within the floodplain and also can simulate the timing. This type of projects this type of a modeling is suitable for evaluating projects because it takes into account more factors than what you see in the FIS, flood insurance study models, which are steady state modeling. So we wanted to have all this stream to be in that basically integrated with that kind of modeling. There are a few studies that we had. SEH had done a good unsteady state hydraulic model of the Burns Harbor, upstream of Lake George. And so we used the bathymetric data from that one, bridge survey data, and we combined that with more recent topographic data on the overbanks outside the channel, as well as, of course, the updated flows that we will do through our, come up with the hydrologic modeling, which we did. The Metropolitan Water Reclamation District, Chicago, had some large model of entire watershed. However, unfortunately, that model, was unsteady model, but it was not refined enough for us to do. It was very large subbasins and large, and the data was also somewhat old in those data, but didn't reflect exactly. We use FIS models, flood insurance models, and evaluate those and find out that many bridges didn't match current flood event or configuration sizes. And so, but we used to steal the data we could from them. Lawson Fisher had done in the study as a very short reach of Lake George outlet. We used that in our study. And finally, IDNR had some other studies from Burns Ditch that included Burn Ditch, but was a steady state, has some useful data we took those. We put it all together. In terms of hydrologic model, again, the model that gets rainfall into flow values that we could use in the hydraulic model, we had about 186 square miles of watershed that we included in this one here. You can see that we had the sub-basin small watershed refined enough, about 5 square miles each, so that we can look at impact of the projects in there. You can notice on the top left corner of your screen, more or less, that we, for the Little Cal and Heart Ditch and all those areas are not combined. We use the input data basically from the gauges and measurements. For now, in the future, once we have another project underway for all that watershed in terms of both hydrology and hydraulics, and once we have that done, that can be attached to this instead of this gauging. But for now, so that we have the major portion model, we have that as an input. And same thing for the east branch of Little Cal. But overall, we have 186 square miles watershed broken down into 5 square mile sub-watersheds, updated land use, updated soils, topography, rainfall data to come up with this comprehensive hydrologic model of this watershed. Then we had the hydraulic model, created this unsteady state model that used the bathymetry and survey data from previous models and newer digital elevation models. And whatever models that better information was available have been used in this. Updated bridge information, dam geometry, topography, roughness values, the inflows that we generated from those hydrologic models at different locations, and other data, the details. Altogether, we have 54 miles of stream, the entire Burns Ditch, Little Cal, some portions of Little Cal, Deep River, and you can see on the screen as the mileage, each one of those things, and 9 miles of Burns Ditch, about half a mile, that small step of the Little Cal with that input coming in, 28 miles of Deep River, about 4 miles of Duck Creek, 6.5 miles of Turkey Creek, and the all entire length of 6 miles of main Beaver Dam Ditch. So all this data is corrected there. There are about over 90 bridges or culverts are included in the model, 2 inline weirs, offline storage facilities along the thing. And so both hydrologic model and this model were calibrated to 2 major floods, 2008 flood and 2019, where we had good data. And so by calibration, we mean we changed the parameters so that we are sure that for those flood events that historically happened, we are close in terms of the results. The hydrograph that is generated from the hydrologic report or the elevations that we see. And so that model calibrated, and so we have this model now, which we then turn into a what we call an existing condition model. So this existing condition model is the same model that we had, reduced and calibrated, but now has all the updates, plus it is simulating the 10-year and 100-year rainfall distributions, that so that we can have some medium events, moderate event, I will call it, and larger events. So this will become the base for evaluating future projects, and also, of course, it generates up-to-date information right now. There was of course, the next component was to document the results. We have a very detailed model, detailed report that talks about all the assumptions, all the data to be there, so that we could be used, and we know what went into the report. We also did this report, which is right now, I think, is the internal QC done. Report is done, but we just reviewing it and before publishing it. Also included guidance for future use of the modeling, and also a few simulation to see in how this model would work. We were looking for how this modeling can be used and summarized for the use of commission in your determination of what the regional impacts of the project is. So we look in different ways. But we came up with this. Finally came up with this summarization. I realize you may not be able to read everything, but I will go to examples and show that. But basically what we have, a particular project, we have a project information, then a tab in there, and then we have a tab that has all the cross-sectional data for both existing condition model, the base model, and what the new simulation of whatever project we are looking at. So we have those cross-sections, hundreds of cross-sections. That's not easy to compare for someone. For what we have is now that data is extracted into a summary table, which you see here, and that's a portion of that summary table. But that portion of summary table basically had stream reaches of importance to us. So it says from here to here, and you see a map on the left that shows those reaches in there. And then the conclusion of that is in another tab, which we'll talk about. So overall, how does the water surface, elevations either increase, decrease, or how does the velocities or discharge change? So just to test this and to also, as part of our work, we looked at a few projects. This first one was all the most recent projects, major projects that were done from 2019 to now, so the last 5 years. Major project was impact of Lake Station Dam removal and replacement with that riffle. The railroad of Lake, the downstream of Lake George, that railroad opening, replacing the 3rd Street over the Lake George. And so when we look at that, we simulate that modeling, we can see that, and first of all, we're showing the location of those, and on your right-hand side, you can see those stars, there's location of that. We look at those, the results. As you see, we have a major reduction in water surface elevations, up to 1.1 foot in just reaches immediately upstream of these areas, reaches 8, 9, 10. And so basically a very positive project. So that goes to my check mark on that bucket. However, like every other project, sometimes there are also other could be also increases in elevation. And here, because we have opening up, of course, the creek water may go down faster. And so in some reach downstream, you have some increase in water surface elevations, small, 0.2 feet only, or 0.1 foot. So those coupled. So there is mostly positive, but there are some negative, and those negatives may be tolerable. In this case, there may be a reach that it's done, but we want rather know that before we even look at the project. But is that tolerable? Is that okay? Is in the location, doesn't have any building, and does it dissipates downstream, which in the case did as well. So that's how we an example of how those projects could be looked at. Stinky Creek diversion project has been discussed in this commission for some time, and we always wondering what is the regional impact of this project. We know there has some positive impacts locally. So when we put it in this big model that has all these reaches and integrated everything, and on a steady state model, now for sure we know that as to the level of accuracy, we can say that the impacts are really negligible in terms of either elevation decreases overall along the deep river or along the stream downstream of the project site. Negligible water surface peak elevation increases also, so it is not detrimental either. No major change in either velocity or discharge. So that's how we say, okay, it was a neutral type of project, and it's probably locally good, but at least we know that the impact downstream. Now, these were the two projects that, or with another one which wasn't our scope, but we had time, and we had a budget left, and then we still do. Asked Mr. Repay, so there were other things that you wanted to look at. So there are a few of them that will be in the report. So I'm not sure if I want to go through all of them, but and there were some, either ideas or it could be, a project. The last one, I kind of interested in just sharing that with you. Peggy was just looking at, just beaver dam ditch river and stream, and that one has a rather large floodplain area. I will show the next slide. And so we're saying, what happens if we are, those floodplain storage areas are somehow filled, developed, levied off, whatever that is? Would there be an impact to the downstream? So again, the project we're looking at is just here off the left, and on Beaver Dam Beach. And so when we did that simulation, we're finding that you may then have up to 5 foot increase in the upstream end of the Beaver Dam Beach, which goes down for a while. So definitely a major impact downstream. Not that anybody has suggested that, but that really highlights the importance of the flood storage, which is available right now along the stream. So this is a depiction of of course, at this scale is difficult to see, but everything you see in the magenta color is the floodplains for the 100-year condition. And so you can see that Deep River project, of course, I'm sorry, the Beaver Dam Ditch floodplain that we're talking about, but at the star next to it, that storage was basically taken away. We all saw what the impact was. But that's true with all the floodplain storage and all the wetland storage in the watershed. Those are existing natural infrastructure, as you know. We didn't pay for it, but it's available to us. And oftentimes we have been saying that, we watch those floodplains, because once we lose them, then we have to compensate for them with the expensive man-made flood storage. And of course, so that goes just a tangent to our study that preservation of those existing floodplain storage is crucial, whatever we can do. Some additional considerations to share with you. For my last slide. The one is that this current tool only evaluates the hydraulic impacts. You're not, impact of sediment supply, erosion, or recreational, etc. So you have some projects done in the watershed that their goal is to reduce the sediment, as an example. We are not evaluating, we only evaluating the hydraulic impact. And just because there's no regional impact of the project, or no regional benefit of the project, it doesn't mean that the project does not have a localized benefit. We're just looking at the big picture of those major streams. We have this updates definitely as a better data, more up-to-date data, both at the risk areas and the hydraulic and modeling in terms of elevations. But it's not intended to replace the regulatory model. The regulatory models, which are in effect, has certain conditions to them. For instance, storage behind the flood that stores behind the culverts or bridges are not to be counted because they cannot be guaranteed that they stay there, or some other things. So we are not just a better data for us to be able to evaluate projects. Some potential use of for other objectives, which was not focus of our current study. We have now, we can map the current flood risk areas in a better, more accurate way, and that could be helping the flood response time, because we have a better, we have a timing, we have how long it takes for a peak flow move from there to here, and some other more data that we can answer. And so that could be useful for planning purposes, for flood response purposes. And then also with the tool in the future, if, as a separate, event, we could look at, are there projects that could reduce some of these risks that we see? For instance, the lake station, some what if scenarios to look for in that area and other ones. So this could be a good use of this model in the future. There need to be a periodic updates of this model Of course, the things that may trigger that could be better topographic information become available for a bridge or stream breach, maybe bridge replacement or structures thing, maybe a new diversion or something comes in. So, and also when we have a better model for Lil Cal, we will integrate that into this model, but it's just every few years that need to be updated so that it's always effective and a good base model. And so I summarized all those things into this. Hopefully, it made sense what we do, but we are absolutely open to questions you might have.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Dan, can you close out your opinion on how this presentation lays out to what we're trying to accomplish since 2008?
I mean, this is, as Siavash said, this is gonna be a tool, and I think it's gonna be a tool that could be used by all the communities that are, or feed into either one of these, and which is probably a vast majority of those that are in the Little Cal watershed. And I think it's a tool that the drainage board can use in Crown Point. I think it's individual communities can use, and I think it's our ability to use this as well to evaluate applications. And but he pointed out, not necessarily just because there's not a regional impact, doesn't mean there's not a local impact that may be beneficial to that community that's applying for it.
So can it be used for that particular purpose, or is it only going to be something that can be utilized on a regional perspective?
That's, I mean, I think it's
That's one of my
maybe regional, but I think that there, you could see, based on the cross sections, I would imagine, Siavash Beik. Or Peggy, you guys did the report, that you could utilize it some places where the impacts are. And even when we did that railroad crossing and Third Street Bridge, there was, if you saw, there was an impact negatively just shortly downstream, but by the time it made it all the way down, it dissipated to negligible, if that was how I read it.
Right. Yeah, Chairman Baker, for that answering that question, I think yes, it's possible if you have detailed in that stream. So some of these models, some of these impacts or projects are happening into smaller streams that are not part of this integrated model. However, the flow values and for the watershed and stuff like that could be used for that one. Particularly, we want to know if, along a small tributary, there's other modeling that's happening. Our objective was to see, okay, is that changing something in the main stems, those major streams? Peggy, do you have anything to add there?
Just it depends on the size of it. Like you say, if it doesn't hit one of those streams, then it's kind of, you need to just do the smaller detailed study that's where you're going to see your impacts.
I mean, because it's very cool in how you had it all done, and with those sub basins, I thought that there might be an opportunity if there was some way to kind of drill down. I mean, I understand it's a big picture scenario and it's really for big projects, but it's also to, help the local communities have another tool in their quiver from the standpoint, or it should be an arrow in the quiver, to be able to handle some localized issues, even though it doesn't have a huge impact on the system-wide situation. That's all.
Certainly, I understand.
And then one other question I had was, as these projects are submitted and you're utilizing the model, what kind of an executive summary would come back to somebody like us associated with some applications that would come in? So that would be something that I'd be interested in as well, because there's negligible in some of the examples. Is that a benefit? Is it just meaning it's not creating problems? So how might we able to come up with a process to be able to have some kind of feedback based on the model that these particular applications and the applicants have made, and we can check off and read what it does to this model or what kind of information we have off that model.
Certainly, and this would be, I think, the Excel sheet for each one of those projects. There would be Excel sheet like this, where the person brings the cross sections in, and that's too much detail. But then summary would be in the form of this table that you see on the right. So it has reach by reach and what elevations. For instance, in this project, you can see some numbers for every reach, and also that yellow portion, you see that it's basically summarizing that information. That's something that the evaluator would look at that. That table is generated automatically when the project is put in, but then somebody would write down those few words and hopefully my bucket for you to know if the project has impact. But that's what we are trying to do, is summarize it into this in a word. Executive summary would be that shaded yellow as far as results, and that shaded gray in terms of what the project is and the detail.
And it relates to the platform for the municipalities. Is this something that's on the web? Is this something that you're gonna send out, and how is that updated so everybody's singing from the same song sheet?
Yeah, that's something we need to work with. But it was at least when we generated this, it was meant to be the results could be summarized in the Excel sheet and they could be printed to a PDF. And then if that's commission wants to put that on the web or something, that's your thing. Peggy,
I was just going to say, this is set up so that negligible is determined by already preset differences. So it's not like somebody could go, well, I think negligible is a foot of difference.
You worked in Lake County before, huh?
Can you go 2 slides up?
Sure. I'm sorry.
We got the buckets. Projects.
Down or up? This one?
Keep going one more. What's your question? You've got a list of impacts of other proposed projects.
Yes. I'm sorry. Here, this one.
That's the one. And then you got the X's, which means
Those are location of the projects.
not going to do anything to help a situation.
It makes it worse.
Yeah, so the X's there are saying that it's just the negligible impact on those one. Each one of them also is like that spreadsheet. You just
That first one you got a checkbox by.
Yeah, this one, yes.
What's the basis of that? Because I'm looking at your notes there. And
Yeah, that's a Harrison. Yeah, that's the
Increased the railroad by Harrison Street on Turkey Creek,
right.
gave it half again as much opening, and it had some reduction upstream of the railroad, 0.3 feet, so it's not that much, but it was a reduction.
In a
not an
big
increase.
rain event, what you're saying is the water is gonna move faster through there.
Yep.
Okay.
And it didn't have
These-
significant detrimental downstream. It didn't increase. I was surprised it didn't increase flow more.
Yeah, and I was going to say that these in the report, of course, these are full spreadsheet PDF of those results. I just wanted for the presentation purposes just summarize them, but they're
That's fine.
similar to the other ones. There's a table with how much per each reach.
Mr. Chairman, I have a couple questions too.
Yes, sir.
Levon, did you have? Sounded like you had a question too.
I did. One of my questions was, I think Peggy sort of touched on it a little bit, and so did Siavash. So you talked about the tributaries. You didn't necessarily take under consideration, but besides like the streams and the tributaries, is there anything else, gauge data, more gauges? Is there anything else that can make this data more granular, make the results more granular, increase the, what do you call it? Like increase the certainty?
Thank you for the question. I know Peggy gonna give a better answer than I would, but I would say that when we look at the big picture, a large project, we have advantage of stream gauges, as you pointed out, that we can calibrate the model too. When it comes to smaller tributary streams, unless there's a gauge there, really we are at the dark in a way. We have, usually we try to use the high water marks along the stream. If there was a flooding, that was something to calibrate the model. But that's one of the things, is that the accuracy of this modeling becomes smaller and smaller because you have gauges. The more gauges, the more you have, the more accurate. Peggy?
I was just thinking more along the lines of each of those subbasins can be more detailed for that subbasin could be done and then plugged in, and then still make sure it doesn't throw off calibration, which would then give some trust in the use of that basin.
Good point. In other words, we have the model that we have right now has flow values generated at the end of each one of those watersheds, at the outlet of each watershed. That number could be used to, if we said calibrate or to validate other models that are done by a person who's doing the modeling, saying that, okay, I'm going to discharge now, I'm going to match that discharge so that we have the same hydrograph more or less. And then that would be more accurate in that sense. But we are not necessarily right now. I think it was not the feasibility of modeling every little stream may be not very feasible.
The other question I had, just one more, and we sort of touched on it, but is there a way that, I know you said that this is, you put the data goes in and then the yellow is sort of outcome data or output data based on the inputs. But is there a way to customize like like a query or a configuration, some sort that where you almost got like a KPI or a key performance indicator, so that we all look at this data and we all say, whether it's across municipalities or Little Cal, we all say the interpretation of this information means this. And so maybe we're looking at a dashboard, right? And the dashboard basically says, based on the information that was put in for a cross-section of data at a certain location, that the inputs that were put in, we all interpreted to essentially mean this. And so now we all understand that the indicator associated with that is that it's a green check mark over the bucket, and it was based on these conditional inputs that were put in this particular set of output data. Is there a way that this program can do that?
Just a very good question. Peggy, do you have an explanation that I have?
I mean, there's various ways we could pull out whatever is important. I'm thinking, one thing may be more important to know than another one. And I mean, we can pull out all sorts of information, like what's the extent of this decrease, what's the extent of this increase, even from each of those reaches, if it's needed in more detail, a sub-reach.
My assumption
Is
is
that what
looking
the
for the same
question?
kind of question, LeBron, is that, each project stands on its own. So since they're all going to be kind of different, it's all going to be really contingent upon what we're going to look for in those particular projects, as opposed to having something that's just a template for each particular thing. So I think we should have some kind of consistency as far as the reporting mechanism from an executive summary perspective as we review those applications. But we're back to each project standing on its own. And then
Yes.
we'll look for those particular items to do, because my understanding and how this was looked at as a big picture was that as new projects happen, is it going to have an impact 2-3 communities down the way? And then on the system as a whole, and how much volume, and what could we do? If we took this bridge out, what would happen? Those types of things. So we were able to utilize its impact on the system as a whole, not just in that particular community.
Yeah, and then we would judge the merit of the application based on that
Yes.
criteria or
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes, and I was going to add that as you indicated, the modeling, when it's done and put in that spreadsheet, it automatically does the subtraction or comparison, cross section by cross section, which is one of the tabs. So if somebody wants to drill into it, the next tab summarizes that into this reach by reach, so you can see. And as Peggy pointed out, we already have, and we'll put it in the report, that what was the criteria when we say negligible. What does it mean? Is it 0.1 foot difference or something? So that is there, but that also is automatically determined negligible. So it's a consistent criteria, which will be transparent in what it is that considered. Beyond that, and as it's a case by case basis for you to see the consequences. For instance, if you have a 0.2 inch, 1 inch of increase downstream for a small reach, but very positive upstream, you're going to say, well, this reach doesn't have any structures. There's nothing in here. It's flow is in channel. So I think this, we don't call it negative. It's just, okay, there's some consequence, but it's not consequential. Versus the other project, maybe in a very strategic place. You have something you don't want to have even an inch of increase in the flooding. And so that's where you look at it and say, well, even if it's, still, more measurable and consequential. So we're not going to, allow this project, something like that. So it's case by case in terms of judgment. There's a judgment at the end that has to come, but we can provide the data consistently for you to make that judgment.
Okay. Helps?
Yeah.
Yes, sir. Any other questions?
Yeah, just
Broadman.
a couple quick ones, I think. Talking off your additional consideration slide at the end.
Yes.
Do you guys have any insight or thoughts based on your review of this model? And thank you, by the way, this is very comprehensive, helpful to us. About whether there are projects that might have regional benefit, but local benefit, but negative regional consequences. Back on the slide that Commissioner Wojciechowski has, looking at with all the yellow buckets, it looks like everything we do to Lake George is negative on the system. So I don't know if that has a local benefit, but did you guys see any things where you thought, oh, this might have local benefit, but regional downsides? Out of curiosity.
Peggy?
I don't remember seeing anything that really jumped out to me. I was focused on these things, so didn't look too in depth at additional ideas, but nothing jumped out. I think I was mostly surprised at how consistent the system is and how
Hey, can you say that part again?
consistent the system is in that you have to do a lot in one area to change much in another area.
And I want to add something to this, Peggy, that one observation that we had, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but like, for instance, the interaction between Deep River and Little Cal, the Deep River seems to be controlling the flow and everything. So it really, if we are looking for impact downstream of the confluence, no matter what we do in the Little Cal, that's not going to change the picture down so far as the Deep River is high there, because it puts a backwater into this. So we see how consequential the Deep River is in the whole system coming in. And that goes back, if I may, again, into the impacts on that one, probably large impacts downstream at the confluence there. And so there goes the value of this flood storage and other features there. Peggy, is that accurate?
Did this work that you did include from the confluence to Burns Ditch?
Yes.
It went all the way down to Lake Michigan. Now there's things with what elevation to use Lake Michigan to start at and its impact, but it impacts through Burns. So the Burns Ditch part is kind of more of a placeholder.
Right, I agree.
Make a lot of decisions there, but
let's face it, the water all goes to Lake Michigan, regardless of what we say or what people in elected office say.
Yeah, but it does go all the way through there. And I think once we have, Chairman, when we have the Little Cal, in that we are developing a 2D model of that as part of the work we're doing for commission, that would be done extensive modeling of the entire thing, all hard ditch, coming into the watershed coming in, and the Little Cal itself would be developed. And so that would be all connected together. So you have all these major streams going to the confluence, and hopefully be able to look at the impacts when you see it.
I have one final question too on the same slide, periodic updates. Do you guys have a recommendation on how often those updates need to occur, or if it's event driven?
Good question. We have similar project in Columbus, Indiana, and that really haven't seen more than every 2 years or 3 years of update if necessary. It depends. If you have a couple of projects that are substantial, it may need that type of a data. Another thing I was going to say, rainfall data that we used for this project for the 100-year and 10-year. For the 2008-2019, obviously was observed rainfall. But for 100-year and 10 years, based on NOAA estimates. NOAA is in the process of updating their data. In 2025 or 2026, we're going to receive updated rainfall information for entire Indiana, including your watershed. And when that happens, a lot of ordinances, standards need to change, and also input to our modeling may change. So we may need to revisit that again in that sense in the updates. But I consider the updates not to be very substantial if you can keep it going for a while. And our situation right now is that thankfully we have budget left in our project that we could be of help as this go on for now. That's right.
Siavash, I'm sorry, you said that NOAA was updating all of its system, data. When is that, 25 or 26?
Yeah, some part of the Indiana is 25, some part 26, but it's in 25 until 26, they're gonna update all the rainfall data, and that would include what we call Atlas 14 data, which has rainfall for depth for and intensity for various durations and return intervals, but they supposedly also want to have climate projections models. So in other words, not that you give what is the rainfall based on history, but also this is what we expect within the next 20, 30 years, which
Outstanding.
really,
Outstanding. All right, gentlemen, we've got some stuff left to do. Is there any other questions for this, on this item? Once, twice. Thank you very much, folks. That was outstanding. And we'll obviously be in constant contact as this thing progresses. Thank you very much.
thank you.